Okay, so I'm going to have a look at development plans, as in the drawings, and have a quick chat about tree retention. We're going to look at the plans, what the plans are telling us, the things that should ring alarm bells. Development plans, there's 5 basic plans: a site survey, which is what's the current existent state of the property, a site layout, which is the proposal, the elevations, as in how it looks from the sides, and then sections, as in elevations cutting through the building, and a landscape plan. The 5 basic sets of plans you see in a set of plans. Site survey. So here's a site survey, and if we just sort of come in closer, we'll see lots of markings around. Those points, 1187 here, 1064, they're our Australian height datums. They're telling us what the levels of the land are, and those lines are telling us, so it tells us the slope of the land. Here's a site survey with some more features on it. As I said, it's showing the buildings, showing the location of a tree, showing us the heights. These are going to become more important a little bit later on. You're going to get the slide, so I won't read that out. So here's our site plan. This is basically the proposed building proposal, and we may have tree protection zones on it, or we may not have tree protection zones on it. I'm not going to get caught up in tree protection zones, but I'm going to get caught up in what we need to look for where that part of the map has a tree protection zone in it. So I said our site plan, we have an overall idea of where things are going to be on the property. So our elevations are, I said, side on, and we're going to have a look at this one down in the bottom corner. It's an elevation. This is how it's looking from the southeast, as it says down the right here. So we can locate it on the property, and this is generally what the property is going to look like, sort of at the boundary line. We're zooming into this part of the plan here, and we're going to start identifying some things that are telling us what might be going on. So NGL, natural ground level. Down here, yep. So that line, that red line there, the red arrow, is our line of natural ground level. Why is that important to know that? Because of what's going on above it, which is the proposed ground level. And we can see that the proposed ground level is 5.3 as opposed to the natural ground level of 4.3. So we know that there's a metre of fill in this area here. And as an arborist, that tells us something, and we need to sort of look out for that. Now, if we don't have the plans giving us these height data points, we can possibly work it out. Hopefully we might be able to find somewhere on the plan a measure itself, so I can take that measure, I can use a vernier caliper or a piece of paper that I've marked and move it down and sort of measure it, and I say, well, these distances are about the same, so I know there's a metre of fill there. And if that's inside a tree protection zone, that's something to be careful of or to identify, and we need to start advising appropriately. So in this section of our plan here, we're seeing something else. We'll see our natural ground level sloping down. All of a sudden our natural ground level disappears, it's cut out there. And again, we've got that mark that says it's a metre of cut there. So again, if that site cuts well inside your tree protection zone, well, that's telling something that we might be having an impact on a tree, and so we need to be paying attention to that. Luckily for us, we've actually got a notation here, the site cut, there's a site cut there, and it's going to be a metre deep. Other elevations. Here's an elevation showing 2-storey building. As soon as I see a 2-storey building, what am I thinking? I'm thinking scaffolding. So it's not just the edge of the building outline. I'm thinking there's 1.5 metres, sometimes 2 to 3 metres. That scaffolding could be there. That scaffolding could be coming into a tree protection zone that's not inside the building outline, so our tree protection zone comes up just next to the building envelope, but we now know that our scaffolding is going to be inside that tree protection zone. And because we've taken measurements of the tree's canopy, we also know how many branches are going to get cut up for the 3 weeks that scaffolding needs to be there as well. So maybe we could set up a plan that we could tie those branches back or move those branches or set up that scaffolding in a different way so we don't have to lop half the tree just for the 3 weeks of the build. Now, if I see a basement, I'm thinking, how's that basement going to be built? And one of the ways is it's going to be built by putting in contiguous board piers, which is the machine that we see here on the left. Why is that important? Well, if I have a tree, yeah, it's a tree, obviously, with branches that are over that basement line, that contiguous board pier, that auger has to get underneath that canopy or work through that canopy most of the time. So this is a situation where the contiguous board piers were down the boundary line through here, so this machine actually had to come up and go through the canopy of the tree, and they only snap 3 or 4 branches, but sort of at the end of the day it's irrelevant because this is a 3-story building going all the way up, so those branches are gone. But we probably should have been in there and pruning those branches off before the auger comes through. And so we've identified that because we can advise our clients so they can set up our tree protection management plan appropriately. I see a basement car park. What am I also thinking? I'm thinking, well, if they're not going to put contiguous board piers in, they're going to excavate. So here's the line of my basement. Here's the basement, and that's where it would be on the map. Okay, but this is where actually the digging was done. So we need to know about the construction techniques. So it's okay having a basement line and my TPZ coming up to that basement line, but that's not where the excavation or the works are going to stop. They're going to come back a bit further. So understanding soil types and construction methods, it gives us an indication as how far from that building line, closer to the tree, the works are actually going to occur, so we can assess our impact accordingly. That's not a good outcome. Going back to basement car parks, here's our tree protection zone, which was up to the line of where the basement car park was going to be, because that's the edge of the development. It's not going to get any further to the tree. So of course they come along and they excavate, and this is what happens. There's no soil for the fence to be on anymore. There's no soil at all, and we're digging well and truly inside the tree protection zone. So sections. In working out where the cut and fill is going to be through the development site, we're looking at our sections, and on our plan, on our site plan, we have all these little figures dotted around. They're circles with an arrow pointing a certain way. Here's bringing them up really close. And if I go back to the site plan, there's one at the top and one at the bottom. There's also one at the left and the right, and they correspond. So we have the section for B, C and D, and if we work through our plans later on, we'll see our sections plans, which are basically, again, they look like elevations. Well, they are elevations, but they'll be labelled. So we have B, C and D, and I think we're going to look at B, which we are looking at, B. So here's our elevation for a section for B. We've got our natural ground level, then we've got a little bit of fill down here, and that correlates to this part of our site plan. So again, if we have a tree protection zone anywhere in that, or especially through this part here where there's fill, if our tree protection zone is covering that area, we know there's fill, so we need to identify that in our tree protection report or make adjustments, provide advice. And of course, the little black arrows tell us which way we're looking, so of course we're looking from this direction. Section B, so here are our 3 sections. So we just looked at B. Here's C again. So we're seeing now we've got some site cut up this area, some fill in the middle, and a little bit of fill down the bottom here. And again, this is D, the last section we're looking through, a little bit of site cut, and then some fill. So then we can go back to our site plan and we know what's going to happen through those areas. And that's if we don't have a really good set of data points, height data points on the plan, as well as your finished floor levels, and I'll talk about them a little bit more. In a landscape plan, what are we looking for? Well, if we drill down to this section, we're looking for these lines, actually. What could this be? Why would I have a fence or a wall or a line sort of just off the boundary? Most likely it's going to be a retaining wall. This is not marked, this is not noted. We do have what looks like data points here, but we don't have anyone on this side of the line. And that's not very clear, but sometimes that's as clear as you get. You can get some really poor plans. And if that's the case, don't be scared to ring up the person who's got their phone number in the bottom right-hand corner of the picture and get them to walk you through it. So what we're looking up here, we're looking at these plans again. Just up here, we drill down here. I think I can just barely make out that this says step. So if that is a step, then there's a level change. That's what we're looking for. And if that's a retaining wall, there's a level change. If that retaining wall, what might be a retaining wall, is going through your tree protection zone, well, we've got that level change and we have to deal with it. Is it fill, is it site cut? Either one of them, one of them is going to be worse than the other. But at least we know we need to have further investigations. As I said, and these may be our data points, and they could tell us the levels if we could read them clearly. So other things to look for in plans: rainwater tanks, legal points of discharge. We've just sort of touched on retaining walls, your ASD lines, points, finished floor levels and stairs, because these all tell us where excavations are going to be. So back to our site plan, again, down in this bottom right-hand corner, we've seen the rainwater tank, okay, and lucky for us, we've got a note, there's going to be an excavation to a sewer point somewhere, so there's going to be a pipe running for this. So I know that there's not only a rainwater tank here, and the rainwater tank itself is irrelevant because it's above ground, but I know there's going to be an excavation from this rainwater tank to somewhere else, and for this, it's clearly marked on the plan here, but that might not be marked, so we've got to ask ourselves or ask the person who's doing the plumbing or designing the plumbing, where is the excavation going to go to, because a rainwater tank is plumbed into the stormwater outlet. Yep, it's mandated, has to happen, so there's going to be some excavation to a larger stormwater pipe, which will eventually lead to our legal point of discharge. So as I said, and so here's our excavation line somewhere, and we need to figure out where that is, because it may be going through one of our tree protection zones later on. So again, back to our site plan, I see another rainwater tank. This one's telling us it's for bushfire fighting. I don't know much about it other than it's above ground and it's colour bond. What I don't know is where the pipes are going to, if there are any underground pipes. So, and one of those lines, possible locations for the pipes, is going through a tree protection zone. I need to do something. So, typical design of an underground rainwater tank, there's an underground pipe going into it and an underground pipe going out of it. So if we find an underground water tank in the front yard or backyard, we might have to find out where there's two pipes going to, or where one pipe's coming from and where the other one's going to, because again, they're going to be caused by excavation. So again, back to our site plan, and this left-hand side of the screen I see my legal point of discharge. There's a legal point of discharge to the stormwater, which is authorised by your council, but it's the location that's authorised and the flow rate, and it's up to the building surveyor to design the drainage pattern and system that it gets there. There's also a legal point of discharge for the sewer, and that's authorised by the local or the responsible water authority, such as Yarra Valley Water, South East Water, etc. And they're generally done towards the end of a development, so it might be difficult finding out where those are planned to be, but you know that there's going to be excavations somewhere from the house or the dwelling or the building to a point that's either at the rear, and if we have got some good plans to show that there's an easement in the rear, and if we know there's a stormwater easement and a sewer easement, then we know that the pipes are most likely, or we could guess that the pipes are most likely going to be going from the dwelling to the rear of the property. Otherwise the stormwater and the sewer may be in the front of the property, so by asking a few questions we can figure those things out. So again, our legal point of discharge, I know where it's going to finish. I don't know where the pipes are coming from, but I know that some of them are going to go through my tree protection zone maybe, and I know if some of them are most likely to go right through the middle of my tree protection zone, I've got some issues and I need to start figuring some things out. So my AHD lines, you'll see them down here in the bottom of the picture. They run all the way up to the top. Here we are a bit closer in, and I've colour coded them for you, and you see as they run across the page, and now I can get a better visual of the contour of the land, which helps me identify sort of where the impacts of site cuts and site fills might be greater. So on our plan, we may have the AHD points. This is the Australian Height Data Points, and they'll be dotted around the place. And so again, if I don't have my lines, or if the property's too small and the gradients changes too low, for the lines, the gradient lines to be significant, I'm going to be looking for my AHD points. Retaining walls, again, so I've got a landscape plan, I'm seeing some walls there, and of course because I'm paying attention, I see down here something that looks like steps, and if I've got steps, then I've got a level change. If I've got a level change, I've got site cut-off fill, and again if they're inside the tree protection zones. So retaining walls, they are not a great thing to miss, generally, and they can have a bit of an impact. This retaining wall was only 1 metre and a bit high. The excavations have come behind where the retaining wall is by 50 to 60 centimetres. And of course that becomes part to do with the people who are constructing it. But when I'm assessing the impact of where my retaining wall is, it's not just the line of where the retaining wall is, but how much excavation am I going to have behind that towards the tree, because that's my impact, that's my encroachment. It's not where the retaining wall is, it's how much extra soil I'm digging out. So back to our site plan. We bring this up, we have a couple of notifications of our finished floor levels. Why are they important? Well, they tell us what the surface of the building is going to be, and we know that there's going to be a depth of construction behind that. Now that could be half a foot to 2 metres, or 2 metres, 50 centimetres, depending on the building type. So we've got our floor joists, we've got all the underground services, not the underground services, but the way in which the building's constructed differs, obviously. So we need to have an idea of what the depth of the built form is beneath that finished floor level. And if we compare that finished floor level to an AHD, when that finished floor level is right next to or inside a tree protection zone, it might tell us something. And it hasn't happened very often, but I have had twice, at least twice, where I've had a building on pier and beams above grade because it's being built inside the tree protection zone, where the finished floor level is 30 centimetres below the natural grade. And that's picked up because I've got the finished floor level and the natural grade and the known grade. So obviously something's gone on there. So stairs, here are our stairs, a couple of markings, a couple of lines and an arrow. The arrow is telling us which way the stairs are going. In this case the stairs are going up to the left, and we sort of know that because we've got our finished floor levels of 700 on one side and 6.4 on the other, so we can tell those stairs, do some maths, those stairs are about 18 centimetres high each as we're stepping up. So referencing plans, if we're going to be referencing plans, down in the bottom right hand corner of most plans we have some details. These plans we're going to be calling the teaching plans for arborists for the VTIO, blah blah blah. There's a fair bit of information on plans, and when you're referencing plans in your reports, can you put as much in as you can, because that stops you from getting caught out by them having a different set of plans. If you just go teaching for arborist plans revision A, also not revision A, there could be 3 sets with the same title. So you're looking at one, the architect's looking at one, and the applicant sent a third set of plans in, all with the same titles but with different information. So to make sure we all know that we're talking about the same set of plans, put as much as we can in. And the 4 sets of plans, or some of the plans we looked at today, I'd be referencing them like that if I was putting them in my referral back to the planning department or writing a report. And if you have got revised plans, they may have a date with the latest date of revision. Make sure you put that on as well. So tree retention, it's a quick little tanty I'm going to have. I won't go on too long. So Steve, Shannon, we're talking about tree retention. So here we go with Melaleuca. Let's pretend this is protected by an overlay. It's a good tree to be retained. And in one place it would be retained. If it was in the other end of, as Hugh said, if it was at the end of town where there were no overlays, it may not be retained. Because the planning scheme doesn't give it a high enough level of protection. But as a tree, and as a tree that's going to be there for quite some time, and it's not a great tree, it's only 8 metres tall, it's mature, but there's nothing wrong with it, but there's no reason to remove it. It's on the edge of the development site, and this set of units that was built 5 years ago, all these photos you're going to see are taken within a 40-second walk of my house. So these units the house went down. They kept a couple of crappy little trees. You'll see the Stiphyloides, the little cypress here, and a little camphor laurel. So the house is gone, I'm waiting for the trees to go. All of a sudden they started building, I'm waiting for the trees to go, I'm waiting for the trees to go. They finished the build 4 years later. The trees are there. And I must admit, it's much nicer to walk past that because they kept those crappy little trees. They're out of the way. They may not have much of retention value, but there's not necessarily any point in removing them for removal's sake. In the same way that a lot of reports have retention for retention's sake, blah, blah, blah. Well, removal for removal's sake is also just as unimportant. And now another one, the building went down. I was waiting for the ash tree to go, and the little privets and stuff through here, the crepe myrtle. 4 years later, 3 years later, those trees are still there, and they soften, they give it a good impact. Or they lessen the impact. Again, even less of an impact is this little lily pilly around the corner. It's just nicer walking down the street, having these semi-mature trees. And even if we're just leaving a tree that's it might be on the way out, and it may only be there for 10 or 15 years, but that's a mature tree, or at least it's a mature tree that's going to provide some environmental values. It's going to have some nesting, it's going to have some habitat value, while the next generation of trees that aren't going to be viable trees for 10 or 15 years post the finish of the development, those crappy old trees are going to give something for the fauna in the area while the next trees develop. So it's not a bad little handover. So just on Saturday, they finished demolishing another property across the road, and they've left a callistemon, a privet, and a little pitostrum. And it doesn't look real good, but it's going to look a hell of a lot better when that dual lock's finished than this one. No, sorry, not that one. This is around the corner. It's going to look better than that. It's going to look better than this, which is that one. And it's going to have look a hell of a lot better than this, which is what you get when you remove every tree. So there's my rant on tree retention when you couldn't possibly do it.